So you don't want to play fire, and you don't want to be part of the evil nation that changed it all. Well, despite what everyone under the sun is claiming about Tier 0 this and Tier 0 that, it actually appears that you have a plethora of exciting and fresh options to choose from when it comes to topping a legitimate competitive event this format, like for instance a regional qualifier. The past weekend officially kicked off the Phantom Nightmare regional season, and the results weren't just interesting, some of the top finishers were downright shocking. In this video, I want to take some time out to cover a few solid decks for all my rogue duelists out there, or for anyone who's looking for something underground and under the radar this format that can still compete and even get you your invitation to nationals, wherever the heck that might end up being. Fair warning, I am going to be going outside the box here, so don't expect any of the usual suspects like Labyrinth, Branded, or Kashtira, decks that have been around for ages. The first deck I'd like to introduce you to is by far our most shocking, and that's Yubel. No, this isn't a joke, and yes, the deck right in front of your very eyes actually made top 8 at the Des Moines Regional in Iowa, which, hold on, before you say anything, was over 300 players. Christopher Hughes says that he entered the event knowing that his opponents would most likely have no idea what his cards did and what his strategy was trying to accomplish, so Yubel certainly had the surprise factor going for it, and I think it's fair to say that it probably will for the remainder of this format. Much like what you're currently seeing in the Labyrinth deck, Chris opted to run an Unchained engine in his build, which, based on my observations, raises the ceiling of Yubel exponentially. Considering all the Yubel support, Dark Beckoning Beast, and even the Tour Guide engine are comprised of Fiends, making Unchained Soul of Yama is fairly easy for this deck, especially considering that Dark Beckoning Beast and Tour Guide are both one-card Yamas. This engine can not only lead to extra disruptions like the standard Unchained Soul of Rage into a Nightmare monster or something like SP Little Knight, but there's also inherent synergy between the Yubel cards and the destruction effects of the Unchained ones. Take for instance Unchained Soul of Shavara, which can pop any of your Fiend monsters to special summon itself. This of course will trigger both of your basic forms of Yubel to summon additional monsters, and can be used on Tensora D Lotus, which will simply reborn itself for free during your end phase. Shavara, just like in the Unchained deck, can be used to help cards like Tour Guide from the Underworld or Spirit of Unchained dodge targeting effects that your opponent might use on you, cards like Infinite Impermanence. And then of course when it does go to the graveyard, it can add additional disruption with Escape from the Unchained, so that can be a trap card you're going to use during your opponent's turn to further get rid of some of the cards. I'll be honest here, I really wasn't expecting Yubel to do that much right out of the gate, especially without its new field spell Nightmare Throne, which comes out in Legacy Destruction and adds incredible consistency for the deck. But you can play a shocking level of non-engine in Yubel, including a combination of hand traps and powerful board breakers. I think Chris may have picked arguably the two strongest in the entire metagame right now, with Dimension Shifter and Super Polymerization both being maxed out in the main deck, which in theory should have ensured that he saw at least one of those cards in each of his opening hands. Obviously, Super Poly is super on brand for Yubel as a theme. It's incredibly strong right now, with so many meta contenders and archetypes being mono attribute, and of course in Yubel specifically, you can fuse as many of your opponent's face-up monsters that they control as you want. Shifter, on the other hand, can just end many decks' entire turns. And side note, for anyone thinking that there's a big confliction here between Yubel and Shifter, there really isn't, because the Yubel monster cards will still trigger if they are destroyed and banished, and you can recover them from the banish pile as well. And if you happen to draw Shifter after you already have cards in the graveyard, okay, well now it's just your free discard for Super Poly or Eternal Favorite, which is basically Super Poly just in a trap form, and it's not a spell speed 4. Next is Runick Ghoti, or Ghoti Runick, depending on who you ask, which is personally the deck that I'm leaning towards playing for the remainder of this format, because full disclosure, I went out and got all the Ghoti cards a couple of weeks ago, and I am really excited about it. Ghoti was kind of an incoherent mess of an archetype prior to Phantom Nightmare that had serious consistency problems. It often didn't have enough solid starters, disruptions, or even extenders to justify playing it. Fast forward to our newest core set, and a lot of those issues have been addressed in a major and meaningful way. For those who have no idea what Ghoti wants to do, or maybe you just know it as the quote-unquote fish deck that banishes, Ghoti's game plan generally revolves around banishing a bunch of its monsters, mainly the tuners, who special summon themselves back to the field during your opponent's turn, specifically during the standby phase. Now the tuners all give you the ability to quick synchro summon during your opponent's turn, and then the high level Ghoti synchro monsters all have built-in banish effects that range from a simple SP Little Knight banish of a single card your opponent controls to a whole board wipe banish that gets rid of everything on the field. Since your synchro summons are layered, you also get to use the removal effects at different times, so you can kind of use them when you want depending on what the board state and what your opponent puts on it. What you're looking at is a build that was played by Ethan Noble at the Sandy, Utah Regional, which hosted about 174 players and saw Ethan get top 8. The reason to combine Ghoti and Runick is that the Runick cards allow you to start the engine and turbo to the main combo piece, Ariane Post, Serpent of the Ghoti, in the most efficient and practical way possible. Ariane Post banishes a Ghoti monster from your deck, which if you banish one of your tuners will just special summon itself back to your field during your opponent's standby phase so that you can quick synchro in the Ascon for removal. When you quick synchro in the Ascon, Ariane Post's effect is going to kick in and let you search in a Ghoti monster, and this can be chain blocked so that your opponent can't Ash Blossom it. The Runick engine simply streamlines the level 4 non-tuner necessary to get to your level 6 that starts the entire show, while having the same cards potentially serve as disruption or board breakers if you already have the combo with other cards, or if you need those board breaking tools prior to your attempt to combo. Much like with Bestial Runick, the draw power the Runick engine provides to Ghoti deck not only can lead to additional Runick disruptions, but certain Ghoti cards like Snopios can be drawn and used for quick synchro plays that again can lead to even more disruptions to stop your opponent. What I think I like most about Ghoti is the fact that pretty much all the disruption effects are banishing effects, which is arguably the best possible form of removal in this specific format, because the fire decks are so graveyard dependent and reliant, and as I said earlier, with Phantom Nightmare, it gave this archetype more of them, such as Keef, which can banish itself in a monster that your opponent special summons. With Keef, your opponent's probably going to be out that monster forever, while Keef will simply special summon itself back during the next standby phase for you to use Keef again. Ghoti Runick, or Runick Ghoti, whichever one you want to call it, has tons of removal, plays incredibly well around the Biru because most of your synchros are going to be summoned during your opponent's turn. Keep in mind you can also quick synchro into Omni negations like Baron de Fleur, or just other powerhouse level 10s like Sword Soul Chin Ying, which obviously has insane synergy with because of the Runick cards and all the banishing that they do. But then, you know, obviously Ghoti's entire strategy revolves around banishing, so you can pretty much trigger Chin Ying's effect every turn. Baron, on the other hand, can sometimes become a pseudo perma Omni negate because usually you'll summon her, you'll negate something that your opponent throws at you, and then during the standby phase you'll tag back into, you know, one of your level 8 Ghoti synchro monsters, and then the tuners will come back and you'll just synchro summon her again, and eventually once you haven't used the Runick card you'll just kill your opponent in one fell swoop. So this is another really under the radar rogue deck that I like this format, and I think that it shows that this idea that you have to play fire if you want to go to a competitive event and do well simply isn't true. And you know, sometimes playing a rogue deck where your opponent doesn't really know what your strategy does, they don't know what your cards do, they don't know how to interrupt you or what your starters are, your extenders, etc., can definitely be the play. But you guys let me know what you thought in the comment section below, because there's actually a few more of these spicy decks that I want to go over. I'll probably just put them in a different video in a couple of weeks and we'll see how things play out. Obviously we have a couple of YCSs over the next couple of weeks in Vegas, and then we have a Latin American one, and I don't know, fingers crossed, maybe one of these decks will break through. But for right now I am definitely feeling the Ghoti Runick deck, and honestly I'm looking at picking up some Yubel cards as well. So whatever you guys thought, you leave that in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching as always.